Hi, I'm Mina.
And I'm Yules.
Thanks for tuning in to Artificially Informed.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Deep Dive.
Great to be here.
Today, we've got a really wide-ranging set of sources in front of us. I mean, it's quite the stack.
It really is. We're going from, the chemistry on moons billions of miles away.
Right down to the nitty-gritty of politics happening right now in places like Washington, D.C. and Panama.
Yeah, it spans the cosmos, cutting-edge tech, and some pretty complex geopolitical flashpoints. It's a lot to unpack.
So our mission for you, the listener, today is, well, it's not just to give you the headlines. We want to try and connect these dots.
Find those threads, those links between things that might seem totally separate at first glance.
Exactly, those aha moments, right? Like, how does a discovery about, say, sodium batteries maybe connect to trade tensions and tariffs?
We want to provide a route, hopefully an efficient one, to really getting a handle on the big scientific shifts, the changes in global diplomacy, and the economic friction points defining today.
Okay, so the plan is we'll start way out there in space where some fundamental rules are apparently being bent, if not broken.
Then we'll zoom back to Earth, look at the race for new technologies, especially energy.
And finally, we'll dive into the, let's just say, complex world of international relations, conflicts, and even some domestic political shifts.
Sounds like a plan. Let's get started. #tag ILE, the cosmos, Earth, and astronomical frontiers.
Absolutely. And we're kicking off with something that, honestly, kind of throws a wrench into basic chemistry, doesn't it?
It really does. We're talking about Titan, Saturn's largest moon.
Yeah, research from NASA, that's the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, and Chalmers University of Technology in Sweden.
They've found something that seems to defy that core chemical rule we all learned, like dissolves like.
Explain that a bit. What's the standard rule, and what do they find on Titan?
Okay, so on Earth, generally polar molecules, like water, dissolve other polar things. Think salt dissolving in water.
Right. And non-polar things like oil dissolve other non-polar things. Oil and water don't mix.
Exactly. That governs solubility. But Titan is incredibly cold. We're talking minus 179 degrees Celsius, roughly.
Freezing doesn't even cover.
Not even close. And its surface is dominated by lakes and rivers of non-polar liquids, mostly methane and ethane.
Okay, so it's a non-polar environment. What do they see dissolving? Or rather, not dissolving as expected?
Well, it's about what formed. They observed hydrogen cyanide, which is an organic molecule, essentially a precursor to life.
Right, prebiotic chemistry stuff.
Exactly. And this hydrogen cyanide was forming stable crystal structures directly within that nonpolar methane and ethane mix.
Wait, hydrogen cyanide is somewhat polar, isn't it? How can it form stable crystals in a nonpolar liquid like methane? On Earth, that shouldn't really happen without some kind of polar solvent helping out.
That's the core of the discovery. It shouldn't, based on Earth chemistry. It suggests that under these ultra-cold conditions, the rules change. Stability for certain organic structures can be achieved even without the polar interactions we thought were essential.
Wow. Okay, so what does this mean for, like, astrobiology, the search for life?
It's potentially huge. I mean, it suggests that the pathways for complex organic chemistry, the kind that could eventually lead to life's building blocks, might exist in environments we previously wrote off as impossible.
Because they weren't like Earth, weren't polar.
Precisely. We assumed you needed water or something similar, but maybe these extreme cold, non-polar environments have their own unique chemical routes to complexity.
So the potential real estate for life, or at least the chemistry that precedes life, just got a lot bigger in the universe.
Exponentially, perhaps. And it's incredibly relevant for upcoming missions, like NASA's Dragonfly.
Right, the rotorcraft drone they're sending to fly around Titan.
Exactly. Dragonfly is designed specifically to sample the organic materials in Titan's lakes and atmosphere. These findings give the science team, well, new things to look for, new chemical models to test. Maybe organic synthesis is just way more versatile across the cosmos than we thought.
Okay, that is genuinely mind-bending stuff. From cold chemistry on Titan, let's jump to the history of water itself. A discovery around a young star called V883 Orionis.
Yes, this one is also pretty fundamental. V883 Orionis is a young star still surrounded by a massive disk of gas and dust where planets are forming, a protoplanetary disk.
And they found water in this disk.
They did. But the key finding is what kind of water. They detected significant amounts of deuterium oxide, which is often called heavy water.
Heavy water. Why is that significant? How does that tell them the water's age?
Okay, so deuterium is a heavier version, an isotope of hydrogen. Normal water is H2O. Heavy water has deuterium instead of regular hydrogen, so D2O or sometimes HDO.
Got it.
When a star like V883 Orionis ignites, the intense heat and radiation tend to break down complex molecules and also preferentially strip away lighter isotopes. So water that forms after the star is born usually has a lower ratio of deuterium to regular hydrogen.
Okay, makes sense.
But the water they detected in the disk around V883 Orionis, it had a high deuterium ratio, matching the ratio found in the cold, dark molecular clouds that existed before the star even formed.
Whoa. So the water didn't form with the star?
It appears not. It suggests the water molecules actually survived the chaotic star birth process. They were likely frozen onto dust grains in the original molecular cloud and were then incorporated directly into the planet-forming disk. The water is essentially inherited primordial material.
That's another aha moment then.
Yeah.
Water, a key ingredient for life as we know it, isn't something that necessarily has to be cooked up fresh in every new solar system.
Exactly. It suggests that water might be a standard, ubiquitous ingredient delivered right from the start, from the interstellar medium itself into the zones where planets form.
Which again boosts the odds that planets forming in habitable zones would have water available from day one.
Statistically, yes. It paints a picture where water is just part of the basic planet-making toolkit across the universe.
It's amazing. Okay, from the ingredients for planets to the hardware we use to leave our own. Let's talk SpaceX. Specifically, the Super Heavy Starship booster.
Yeah, the focus here wasn't just another launch, but a specific maneuver during the third flight test that really caught engineers' eyes.
The hover.
The hover. We saw footage of that absolutely enormous super heavy booster achieving a controlled, stable hover in midair for a few moments before it made its planned, intentional descent and splashed down into the ocean.
It looked impressive, but why is that hover technically such a big deal for their reusable rocket goals? It wasn't landing yet.
It's crucial because it demonstrates mastery over two incredibly difficult things for a rocket that size: precision guidance and a complex engine control.
Meaning
To hold that massive booster steady, hovering against gravity and atmospheric forces, requires unbelievably fast and accurate adjustments to the thrust and the direction, the gimbaling of multiple Raptor engines simultaneously.
yeah, they have to constantly tweak the engine power and angle.
Constantly and perfectly. Nailing that control logic is absolutely essential for the ultimate goal, which is bringing that booster back down for a soft, vertical landing on the launch pad or a catch tower. The hover proves the control system can handle the most dynamic part of the landing sequence.
So it's a critical stepping stone.
Yeah.
It shows they can manage the fine control needed, not just to fall, but to fly down under power.
Precisely. It's moving from controlled descent to actively controlled landing maneuvers. A huge engineering validation.
And while SpaceX is pushing those boundaries, the more routine work of space continues on the International Space Station, the ISS.
That's right. We had a recent Russian spacewalk. Cosmonauts Sergei Ryzhikov and Alexei Zubrytsky went outside.
What were they up to?
Pretty standard operational stuff, really. They installed a new experiment module focused on semiconductor research, continuing the science mission up there.
And they also did a bit of tidying up.
Slight chuckle. Yeah, you could say that. They jettisoned an old, outdated HDTV camera, just tossed it overboard to eventually burn up in the atmosphere.
Cosmic trash day. It's kind of wild to think about that happening hundreds of miles up while we're down here wrestling with, digital trash like deepfakes.
A different scale of problem, for sure. And just before we leave the skies entirely, it's worth mentioning a treat for stargazers.
Oh, yeah.
2 green comets have been visible recently. One, Comet A6 Lemon, was apparently putting on quite a show over places like England, with reports of a distinct ghostly tail visible even without telescopes.
Nice. A little bit of natural cosmic beauty amidst everything else.
Always good to have those reminders.
Okay, so that brings us crashing back down to Earth. Or rather, what's happening inside Earth that affects us up here. The South Atlantic Anomaly, or SAA.
Right, the SAA. This is a well-known, persistent feature. It's essentially a large region where Earth's magnetic field is significantly weaker than average.
And it stretches from about South America over towards southwestern Africa, right?
That's the area. It's like a dent in our planet's magnetic shield, allowing more charged particles from space, cosmic rays, to penetrate closer to the surface in that region.
No, I read the SAA itself isn't new. It's been around for millions of years.
Correct. Estimates put it at around 8 million years old. But the concern is recent changes. Data from the European Space Agency's Swarm satellite constellation.
What did Swarm show?
It showed that since 2014, the SAA has expanded quite dramatically. The area of this magnetic weakness has grown by a size roughly equivalent to half of continental Europe.
Wow, half of Europe in less than a decade. What's causing that expansion?
The prevailing theory links it to changes deep within the Earth in the outer core. The movement of the molten iron in the outer core generates our magnetic field.
The geodynamo effect.
Exactly. And shifts or accelerations in the flow of that molten iron, particularly beneath that region, are likely causing this weakening and expansion of the anomaly at the surface. It suggests the core is, well, restless.
Okay, a restless core sounds vaguely alarming, but what are the immediate practical impacts of a bigger SAA?
The biggest risk is to our technology in orbit. Satellites passing through the SAA are exposed to much higher levels of damaging radiation.
Wow. We're talking GPS satellites, weather satellites, communication satellites.
All of the above, especially those in low Earth orbit or medium Earth orbit that frequently transit that zone. This higher radiation dose increases the risk of what are called single event upsets.
Meaning?
Basically, glitches. High-energy particles can hit sensitive electronics, flipping bits in memory, corrupting data, causing temporary malfunctions, or even permanent damage and total failure of the satellite.
So a bigger weak spot means more risk more often for critical infrastructure we rely on every day.
Precisely. It forces satellite operators and designers to account for this harsher environment, maybe adding more shielding, building in more redundancy, or even adjusting orbits if possible. It's a real-world engineering challenge driven by deep Earth processes. #Tech2, technology, innovation, and ethical boundaries.
Okay, so we have this natural vulnerability affecting our tech from below. Let's shift to the vulnerabilities and the opportunities we're creating ourselves with technology. Top of the list has to be energy, right? The race for clean power.
Absolutely. And one of the biggest long-term bets is on nuclear fusion. The sources are highlighting a really focused push coming out of China.
Where specifically?
At the ENN Group campus in Langfang, which is in Hebei province near Beijing, they're building a device called the EXL50U.
And that's a tokamak.
Yes, it's a spherical tokamak, a specific design variation, but the basic principle is the same, using powerful magnetic fields to confine a superheated plasma.
Plasma heated to what? Astronomical temperatures.
The goal is over 100 million degrees Celsius, hotter than the core of the sun. That's the kind of temperature needed to force atomic nuclei, usually isotopes of hydrogen like deuterium and tritium, to fuse together.
Releasing huge amounts of energy in a process like a miniature star.
That's the dream. Clean, abundant energy with no long-lived radioactive waste. But achieving stable, sustained fusion has been incredibly difficult for decades.
So what makes the Chinese effort at ENN Group stand out? Is it just the hardware?
It seems to me more about the approach. It's described as highly coordinated and rapid. It involves a mix of state funding, private enterprise involvement, and a really fast prototyping cycle.
And they have a specific target date in mind.
They do. The broader goal across several Chinese initiatives, both state and private, seems to be aiming for operational commercial fusion reactors by 2035.
2035, that sounds incredibly ambitious. Considering projects like ITER in Europe have been going for decades.
It is extremely ambitious. Many fusion experts in the West are skeptical of that timeline, given the immense physics and engineering hurdles still remaining, especially maintaining plasma stability for long periods.
So is it a realistic technological goal or more of a strategic political statement? A way to signal intent to leapfrog traditional Western energy dominance?
It's likely a bit of both. Even if 2035 proves too optimistic, the sheer focus, the level of investment, and this coordinated, fast iteration approach mean they are likely accelerating their learning curve much faster than some more fragmented bureaucratic efforts elsewhere.
They're putting serious resources behind becoming a leader in what could be the ultimate energy source. It's a huge strategic play.
Absolutely. It's about future energy independence and potentially geopolitical leverage down the line.
Okay, from harnessing immense power to wrestling with the power of information and misinformation, we have to talk about artificial intelligence, AI, specifically OpenAI's Sora video generator.
Yeah, this hit the headlines quickly. OpenAI had to put a pause on allowing users to generate videos depicting certain historical figures, most notably Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.
Why the pause? What happened?
It came after Dr. King's estate raised serious concerns and reportedly requested a halt. They cited examples of derogatory and nonsensical deepfake videos of him being created using the platform.
Wow. I mean, that cuts right to the heart of the ethical nightmare with this stuff, doesn't it? Hyper-realistic AI making it easy to just distort history, disrespect legacy, spread harmful stereotypes.
It's the core dilemma. The technology's power, its ability to create incredibly convincing fake video, is outpacing our ability to set up guardrails, both legal and ethical.
So OpenAI hitting pause is a reaction. But how do you build proactive safeguards against this kind of misuse when the tool itself is designed for open-ended creation?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Self-regulation, like this pause, is a start, but it's reactive. The deeper challenge is building ethical considerations and robust content moderation, maybe even watermarking or source verification, directly into the AI models themselves. But that's technically very hard.
And it potentially limits the tool's capabilities, which companies might resist. It's a massive conflict between innovation speed and societal responsibility.
A fundamental tension. If we can't trust the depiction of even iconic, well-documented historical figures, what does that mean for our shared understanding of the past or even present events?
A really disturbing thought. Now contrast that ethical minefield with how AI is already being used very effectively and profitably in the commercial realm, like Alibaba in China.
Right. Alibaba deployed its own large language models called Qin LLMs for their huge Singles Day online shopping event.
The biggest shopping day in the world, basically.
Exactly. And they used the Qin models specifically to improve their product search results and the recommendations they show to shoppers.
And did it work?
Apparently, quite well. The reports cited a 20% improvement in search relevance, especially for complex queries where people are looking for multiple features in a product. And they saw about a 10% increase in click-through rates on the AI-generated product recommendations.
So tangible results, better customer experience, more sales. It shows the immediate commercial power of these models when applied to specific business problems.
Absolutely. While one part of the AI world grapples with existential ethical issues, another part is already optimizing billion-dollar revenue streams.
Okay, let's move from digital commerce to, potentially, physical commerce in the sky. Electric vertical takeoff and landing aircraft, eVTOLs, the flying taxi concept.
Yeah, the urban air mobility space. There's been a significant move here involving Archer Aviation.
What did they do?
They acquired a large patent portfolio, around 300 patents, from a German eVTOL company called Lilium, which seems to have run into difficulties. Archer paid about 18 million euros for this intellectual property.
But in what kind of patents are we talking about? Why are they valuable to Archer?
Key technologies related to eVTOL design, things like electric propulsion systems, battery management, flight controls, and importantly, patents related to shrouded propellers or ducted fans.
Shrouded propellers. Like fans inside a protective ring.
Sort of, yes. That design can offer advantages in terms of noise reduction and safety by enclosing the spinning blades, and potentially better efficiency at certain flight speeds relevant for urban air taxis.
So by buying these patents, Archer gets, what? A shortcut?
Essentially, yes. They potentially bypass years of their own research and development, avoid potential infringement lawsuits, and can integrate this potentially crucial tech into their own aircraft, which is called Midnight. It helps them consolidate their position and maybe get to market faster than competitors who are still developing similar tech from scratch.
It's a strategic move to solidify their lead in a very competitive emerging market.
Definitely smells like consolidation and accelerating the path to certification and commercial operation.
Okay. Sticking with electrification and the components needed. Batteries. This has been a huge focus, especially the reliance on lithium.
And the bottlenecks associated with lithium, right? Cost, geographic concentration of mines, environmental impact of extraction. It's a long list.
But there might be a breakthrough with a different element entirely. Sodium.
Yes, this looks really promising. Researchers have reported significant progress in stabilizing a new type of sodium-based compound for use in solid-state batteries.
Sodium. Like from salt. Is it really that much better than lithium?
The key advantages are abundance and cost. Sodium is vastly more abundant in the Earth's crust than lithium, and it's found pretty much everywhere. That means it should be significantly cheaper to source.
But haven't sodium batteries historically had performance issues? Lower energy density, fewer recharge cycles.
They have. That's been the challenge. But this latest research focuses on a new sodium compound, and crucially, they seem to have stabilized it within a solid-state battery design. That stability was a major hurdle previously.
And what does that stability unlock in terms of performance?
The claim is that these new sodium-based solid-state batteries are now achieving performance levels, things like energy density and cycle life, that are comparable to current lithium-ion batteries used in EVs and grid storage.
Comparable performance, but potentially much cheaper and using a far more abundant material. That sounds like a genuine game changer.
It could be. Plus, solid-state batteries are generally considered safer than liquid electrolyte lithium-ion batteries, less prone to catching fire.
So what are the potential implications if this scales up commercially?
Massive disruption. It could drastically lower the cost of electric vehicles, making them accessible to far more people. It could revolutionize grid-scale energy storage, making renewables like solar and wind more reliable. And geopolitically, it reduces reliance on the specific countries that control most of the world's lithium reserves.
It shifts the resource map, essentially, away from lithium bottlenecks towards something much more common.
Exactly. Alongside things like fusion, it points towards a future less constrained by specific scarce resources. A really significant potential leap. #Tag3, geopolitics, diplomacy, and global conflict flashpoints.
Okay, that potential shift towards resource abundance through technology is running headlong into the reality of geopolitical friction, which often feels driven by scarcity and control. Let's dive into that now.
Right, and a key flashpoint seems to be the Panama Canal, a critical waterway for global trade.
What's happening there?
Panama's president, Jose Raul Molino, made a fairly explosive claim recently. He alleged that a U.S. embassy official directly threatened to revoke the visas of Panamanian government officials.
Revoke their U.S. visas. Why?
According to President Molino, it was due to Panama's strengthening economic and diplomatic ties with China. He framed it as diplomatic pressure, contradicting the idea of friendly relations.
That's a serious accusation. Basically saying the U.S. is using visa access as a weapon to influence Panama's foreign policy regarding China. How did the U.S. respond?
The U.S. State Department followed the usual playbook. They didn't comment on specific visa cases, citing confidentiality.
Okay, standard diplomatic procedure.
But crucially, they didn't back down from the underlying policy. They reiterated the U.S. commitment to actively counteracting the influence of the Chinese Communist Party, the CCP, globally.
And they specifically mentioned the Panama Canal.
They framed it in terms of countering CCP efforts to undermine democratic governance, especially in strategically vital locations like the Panama Canal. So, while denying the specific threat, they confirmed the broader policy objective. It's a clear signal of the ongoing U.S.-China tug-of-war over influence in Latin America.
Using economic and diplomatic levers, like visa controls, to push back against China's Belt and Road initiatives and other investment.
Exactly. It's high-stakes influence competition playing out right there.
And this kind of friction ties into the broader issue of trade wars and tariffs, doesn't it? The IMF, the International Monetary Fund, has been sounding alarms.
They have. The IMF managing director, Kristalina Georgieva, specifically warned against the kind of widespread, sometimes unpredictable tariffs that have become more common, particularly referencing the style used by the Trump administration.
What was her main concern?
That these tariffs, while potentially aimed at specific countries or trade imbalances, end up causing broader global inflation, disrupting established supply chains, and damaging international relations overall. She emphasized the importance of rules-based trade.
But those warnings often seem to clash with immediate geopolitical goals, right? Look at the situation with India and Russian oil.
A perfect example. There was a bit of a diplomatic spat after President Trump claimed that Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi had personally assured him India would stop buying Russian oil.
And India said.
India's foreign ministry pushed back quite firmly, saying they weren't aware of any such commitment being made.
And the reality on the ground, the actual trade data.
The data shows Russia remained India's single largest supplier of crude oil, something like 34% of their imports in September. The reason is simple. Russia is offering significant discounts because Western sanctions limit their other customers. India is prioritizing cheaper energy.
So India kept buying the discounted Russian oil despite U.S. pressure. How did the U.S. react?
The White House responded by imposing additional tariffs on certain goods imported into the U.S. from India.
So using trade penalties against India because of India's trade relationship with Russia.
Exactly. It illustrates the IMF's point perfectly. The use of tariffs as a geopolitical tool creates friction even between countries that are generally considered partners or allies, disrupting those economic relationships.
And are businesses just sitting back and waiting to see who gets hit with tariffs next?
Not entirely. Sources suggest that particularly Chinese exporters, facing this unpredictability and seeing tariffs imposed on others, are becoming wary of over-reliance on the U.S. market.
So they're looking elsewhere.
Actively pivoting is the term used. They are reportedly redirecting investment and export focus towards markets perceived as more stable or predictable places like Europe, Latin America, the Middle East, and Africa.
Hedging their bets? Diversifying away from the U.S. consumer market because the trade policy feels too volatile?
That seems to be the strategy. Building resilience by not having all their eggs in one basket, especially if that basket keeps getting new tariff walls built around it.
Okay, let's shift regions now to the Caribbean. There's been an escalation in U.S. military actions there focused on counter-narcotics.
Yes, this has become quite controversial. The reports detail at least 6 U.S. military strikes against suspected drug smuggling vessels, primarily linked to Venezuela since early September.
And these strikes have resulted in fatalities.
Yes, the reports mention 27 fatalities in total across those incidents. The Trump administration has framed this as a necessary part of a war against narco-terrorists operating from Venezuela.
But it's facing criticism.
Significant criticism. Human rights organizations and, predictably, Venezuelan officials have condemned the strikes, calling them extrajudicial killings that violate international law.
Is there any dissent within the U.S. system about this approach?
That's perhaps the most telling part. Admiral Alvin Halsey, who was the commander of U.S. Southern Command, the military command responsible for that region, resigned abruptly.
And why?
Reports indicate he expressed serious concerns about the effectiveness and potentially the legality of these lethal strikes as the primary tactic. His departure suggests a major disagreement at the highest levels of military leadership about this aggressive strategy.
Wow, the head of the command resigning over the strategy itself, that's significant.
It is, and it gives ammunition to critics like Venezuelan Ambassador Samuel Moncada, who has publicly denounced the strikes as state terrorism and called for UN intervention. It points to a breakdown in both regional diplomacy and potentially internal U.S. consensus on how to handle the issue.
Okay, let's move to another major conflict zone. Ukraine. President Zelensky made a trip to Washington recently.
Yes, an urgent trip. His primary goal was to secure more advanced military aid, specifically requesting Tomahawk long-range cruise missiles.
Tomahawks would be a significant upgrade in capability for Ukraine. How did that request land in Washington?
Well, the timing got complicated. Just as Zelensky was either en route or arriving, President Trump made a surprise announcement.
Which was?
He announced plans for a potential summit meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin. There was even talk it might be held in Budapest, possibly facilitated by Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban.
Okay, announcing talks with Putin while Zelensky is in town asking for advanced weapons to fight Russia. The optics there are
awkward, to say the least.
It definitely sends mixed signals.
Yeah.
And President Trump further complicated the narrative around aid for Ukraine.
How so?
He publicly voiced caution about supplying Tomahawks, emphasizing that the U.S. needs to ensure it maintains a sufficient stockpile of these missiles for its own national defense before sending large quantities to Ukraine.
So, coupling the summit announcement with a note of caution on the very weapons Zelensky was asking for. Right. It introduces uncertainty about the future flow and level of U.S. military support. It forces Kyiv to navigate not just the battlefield, but also these shifting diplomatic winds and potential constraints on aid from its most important backer.
A very delicate balancing act for Zelensky.
It's extremely delicate.
Finally, in this geopolitical roundup, we need to touch on the humanitarian situation in Gaza. There was a ceasefire, but the crisis continues.
It deeply continues. The UN World Food Program, the WFP, issued a very urgent appeal recently.
What is the core message?
They are calling for all border crossings into Gaza to be opened immediately and consistently for aid delivery. They say they have a 3-month supply of essential food ready to go, but they simply can't get enough of it in to avert famine, especially in the northern part of Gaza.
So it's a logistics and access problem, not a supply problem.
Primarily, yes. Bureaucratic hurdles, security checks, damaged infrastructure, all these are creating bottlenecks that prevent the necessary volume of aid from reaching the people who need it most desperately.
And the scale of the destruction makes everything harder, I imagine.
Immense challenges. Estimates suggest there are around 70 million tons of rubble and debris across Gaza, which obviously hinders movement. Plus, there have been ongoing issues and delays reported with the reopening of the key Rafah crossing with Egypt.
We also saw an issue with aid neutrality, didn't we? An aid group pausing work.
Yes, an interesting and complex situation. A humanitarian group called GHF, which reportedly receives backing from both the U.S. and Israel, temporarily paused its operations in Gaza.
What?
They faced criticism from some quarters, arguing that their perceived ties to parties involved in the conflict undermined their neutrality and potentially the safety of their operations on the ground. It highlights the extreme difficulty of delivering aid effectively in such a highly polarized and politicized environment. #Tag4V, domestic political turmoil and societal friction points.
Okay, let's bring the focus back home, primarily to the U.S., but also touching on some global societal pressures. There's significant domestic political heat right now.
Definitely. And perhaps the most high-profile example is the indictment of John Bolton.
Former national security advisor under President Trump. What are the charges?
A federal grand jury in Maryland indicted him on several counts related to allegedly retaining and transmitting classified national defense information without authorization. The indictment specifically mentions using personal online accounts for this.
Now, Bolton has been a very vocal critic of President Trump since he left the administration.
Extremely vocal, published a tell-all book, frequent media appearances.
And the timing here is raising eyebrows, isn't it? He's reportedly the third prominent Trump critic or political opponent to face federal charges in a relatively short period.
That's the context that's fueling accusations of political retribution. Critics see a pattern and are raising alarms about the potential weaponization of the justice system against opponents of the president.
How is Bolton's team responding to the actual charges?
His attorney is mounting a defense centered on the classification status of the information itself. They contend that the materials Bolton communicated were not actually classified at the specific time he handled them.
So it's not just about whether he had the documents, but whether they were legally considered classified when he allegedly mishandled them.
Exactly. It shifts the legal battleground towards the complexities of the government's classification and declassification procedures, which can be notoriously opaque and contentious. It suggests this could be a long and complicated legal fight.
That political tension seems to be spilling over into other areas, too, like Silicon Valley, usually seen as quite liberal, but there are signs of division.
Yes, a notable example was the resignation of Ron Conway from the board of the Salesforce Foundation.
Ron Conway.
Yeah.
He's a huge figure in venture capital, right?
Right.
An early investor in Google, Facebook.
A legendary figure, often called the godfather of Silicon Valley VCs, and he stepped down from the Salesforce Charitable Arms Board.
What prompted the resignation?
It followed controversial public comments made by Salesforce CEO Mark Benioff. Benioff had expressed views seen as supportive of President Trump and had also made comments about potentially deploying the National Guard to address issues like crime or homelessness in San Francisco.
And Conway, presumably, disagreed strongly with those positions.
Apparently so. His resignation highlights a growing ideological split within the tech industry. What used to be a more uniformly liberal environment seems to be fracturing, with figures like Benioff potentially aligning more with the current administration, causing friction with traditional Silicon Valley progressives like Conway.
It shows how polarized the national climate has become when it starts affecting board memberships and philanthropic relationships in the tech world.
The political divides are seeping into almost every sector.
Now, let's look globally at another source of friction. Labor rights versus economic pressures. Greece passed a controversial labor law.
Yes, quite controversial. The new law allows employers, under certain specific conditions, to extend an employee's working day up to 13 hours.
13 hours. How is the government justifying that?
They frame it as modernization and flexibility. The argument is that it could allow workers to consolidate their hours, potentially earn more in a shorter work week, or reduce the need for people to juggle multiple part-time jobs to make ends meet.
And how are labor unions reacting?
With outrage. They've staged widespread protests, calling the law a legislative monstrosity. Their argument is that in the midst of a severe cost of living crisis, this law simply opens the door for employers to exploit workers, erode hard-won protections like the 8-hour day, and damage work-life balance.
So a fundamental clash. Government arguing flexibility and modernization, unions arguing exploitation, and a race to the bottom.
A classic conflict playing out against a backdrop of economic hardship in Greece.
We saw a tragic story related to overwork in a different sector, aviation, coming out of Taiwan.
Yes, a very sad incident involving the death of a flight attendant. The circumstances raised immediate concerns about excessive workloads and demanding schedules, potentially contributing to health issues or fatigue.
And the situation was made worse by the airline's response.
The public anger really intensified when reports emerged that the airline, shortly after the attendant's death, had insensitively requested paperwork from the deceased employee's family, presumably related to finalizing employment matters.
Was it incredibly tone-deaf?
Massively so. It amplified the concerns about systemic overwork and highlighted a perceived lack of care from the employer, turning a personal tragedy into a larger public issue about labor conditions in the aviation industry there.
Finally, let's touch on how geopolitical tensions are even impacting international sports. A football match in the UK.
Yes, the Europa League match between Aston Villa, an English club, and Maccabi Tel Aviv, an Israeli club. UK police made the decision to ban away fans, the Maccabi Tel Aviv supporters, from attending the match.
Why the ban?
Explicitly due to safety and security concerns. There had apparently been incidents of violence involving fans at a previous Maccabi match elsewhere in Europe, Amsterdam, and given the current heightened global tensions, the police assessed the risk of disorder as too high.
How was that decision received?
It drew immediate and sharp criticism, most notably from the Israeli Prime Minister, who publicly called the ban wrong.
So a security decision immediately becomes a political and diplomatic issue.
Instantly. It underscores how difficult it is becoming to insulate international sporting events from broader geopolitical conflicts and the security challenges they create. The ideal of sport transcending politics seems increasingly strained.
Is there any chance the ban might be reversed?
Reports suggest the UK government is now involved, working with the police to see if sufficient security resources can be allocated to allow the fans to attend safely, likely due to the diplomatic fallout the ban created. #CheckV. Conclusion and final thought.
Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive, it really feels like we're living in a moment of stark contrasts, doesn't it?
It really does. On one hand, you have these incredible scientific leaps, figuring out alien chemistry on Titan, pushing towards fusion power here on Earth.
Discovering water older than stars, developing potentially revolutionary sodium batteries.
Right, glimpses of a future with maybe abundant energy and resources. But on the other hand,
We're bogged down in intense political rivalries, trade disputes fueled by tariffs, visa threats shaping foreign policy, military actions causing international incidents.
and deep societal divisions bubbling up, whether it's political indictments in the U.S., ideological splits in Silicon Valley, or fights over labor laws in Europe.
It's like our technological capacity is racing ahead, but our ability to cooperate and manage conflict, both internationally and domestically, is lagging behind.
That seems to be the core tension. We see global supply chains literally rerouting themselves to avoid political volatility, even as we develop technologies that could, in theory, benefit everyone.
So the key takeaway for you, our listener, after wading through all this complexity, what is it?
I think it has to be the importance of critical thinking and connecting these seemingly disparate pieces. Understanding the why behind a geopolitical move or an economic policy requires seeing the context, the scientific possibilities, the technological pressures, the historical grievances.
You can't just look at, say, the Bolton indictment in isolation. You have to see it alongside the broader political climate, the history between the players, the arguments over classification.
Exactly. Or you can't understand the push for sodium batteries without understanding the limitations and geopolitical baggage of lithium. It's about seeing the whole messy picture.
So, for a final thought to leave people with, where does this tension lead?
Well, building on that idea of technological progress versus societal friction, maybe the biggest challenge isn't actually the engineering.
How so?
We're proving we can engineer incredible things: fusion reactors, self-landing rockets, potentially planet-finding telescopes. But the truly hard part seems to be stabilizing our information environment and building trust.
Right. If China can pour resources into fusion, aiming to harness the sun.
And astronomers can find water that predates the stars.
Why does verifying basic reality down here feel so incredibly difficult sometimes?
Exactly. In a world where AI can create convincing deepfakes of historical figures like Martin Luther King Jr., essentially allowing history to be rewritten or distorted on the fly, maybe the ultimate resource scarcity isn't energy or minerals.
Maybe it's trust. A shared agreement on facts and truth.
Perhaps. Can our ethical frameworks and our commitment to truth keep pace with our technological power? That feels like the central question hanging over almost everything we've discussed today.
enjoying Artificially Informed.
Hit subscribe and share it with a friend.
From the left, the right, and straight from the algorithm.
Thank you.
That's it for today's Artificially Informed.
Nope. Thanks for spending your time with us.
Yeah.
Stay sharp, stay curious. See you next time.